Coming into this week's episode of Golden Kamuy I, I was actually more excited than I normally am, and I've enjoyed this series from episode 1 of season 1 up till right now. I've always liked this show, but after last week's episode, it really showed me a different side to the series that we really never saw before, especially with Sugimoto and him just actually showing his emotions in such a vulnerable way. Coming out of this episode, I have to say I'm surprised that this might be my favorite episode because it was focused on a character I really had no interest in or I really didn't care about too much. Never really hated Gendro, but I never was a huge fan of him either. So for the fact that this was his episode and just the development, it was absolutely phenomenal. But first things first, the background art once again in Golden Kamuy was absolutely stellar. Starting the episode off just focusing on so many beautiful shots, individual scenery, like it was some of the best art we've seen in this series. They always try to one-up themselves with their background detail and they usually succeed at it. But Gendro's story was actually pretty interesting. I mean, I should have expected that there would have been the twist that the brother wasn't an evil bastard all along, but I really bought into the fact that this was just a horrible guy because that's kind of what you expect in this series a lot of times, is just bad people doing bad things and maybe getting punished by the end. And I like the idea of this family story because this is a character who's been a pretty relevant but not relevant all at the same time, and I never really had a big connection to him. So this is the type of episode that really makes me more invested in his character, whether he'll be a good or bad guy by the end, because really you can never truly trust anyone in this series with where they're going to go, and that's part of the reason I like this series so much. And just seeing him telling his story to Lieutenant Surmi and just the overall progression of what starts off is just a pretty normal family going hunting, getting trapped in the wilderness, thinking this might be your last meal, to then, you know, your best friend marrying your sister, becoming your brother, and then seeing the act of betrayal of stabbing his family member, burning the house down and fleeing. Like, that's a really gripping story, even if it's a character you may not love or hate, but just kind of thought, well, they're a filler character. That's enough to make you say, like, I want to see this character through to the end and see him get his revenge. This is a guy who deserves to get that revenge, and I think the overall progression of how it kind of translates, tying into the Sugimoto War story, and how it ultimately comes to a conclusion where he finally gets to see the man who killed his sister, and then the reveal of just like she had this smallpox and like essentially in that village it's a sign of weakness, the whole family would have been shunned. Like, that's really interesting, especially with this type of culture, because, you know, you'd think modern day someone getting sick, why would you shun a family? But this is a different culture, a different time, a sign of weakness. You wouldn't want them to go in your hunting party. And I think they really tied this story together, even though some of this wasn't the most original plotline ever. You can point to other mediums where something similar has happened, but the way they implemented it into Golden Kamuy was actually really refreshing, especially with how they were detailing these shots. There was a lot of gorgeous shots in this episode, not even just background wise, but the expression and the rage in Genjiro's face. Like, you could feel the pain in his eyes and why he was so obsessed with revenge, because the one that he trusted, the one that he called a brother, betrayed his own family, and then essentially this quest of revenge ended up killing his mother. Like, this was a pretty sad story, and then ultimately how it translates back to the modern day. I'm really excited for next week's episode. Like, I'm even more excited for next week's episode than I was for this week's episode. And this is already my most anticipated because last week showed me a different side of the series, and once again, it showed me another side. Like, I'm really excited for the second half of this season and where it's ultimately going to go, how this cast is going to continue to grow, but also how the interactions are going to play around with each other. There's so much of this half can do. Like, even though we only got 6 more episodes left, we might only ever have 6 more episodes, and it never gets a 3rd season or anything like that. I don't know, but I'm really excited for the remainder of this season. And the music in this episode, really the music in the 2nd season has been absolutely phenomenal, but episodes like these, when you hear just the individual pieces being played as it kind of slowly creeps up and amplifies more and more as the emotional bits are supposed to hit you, it really adds a lot of emotional weight, and I absolutely adored this episode. Easily my favorite. Maybe it's not going to be everyone's favorite episode, but for a character who I really had no interest in, I didn't love or hate him. He was just a character who was there. I would never wished he was on screen or off screen, but this episode makes me really excited for the future of his character and ultimately where the series is going to go from here. Really, I have nothing but positive things to say about this episode. The overall directing was on point, the expressive facial details, the music, and just the character writing with the backstory tying into past and also future arcs. Like, this is absolutely incredible. Let me know whatever you thought of this episode. Did you love it as much as myself, or did you find it a bit weaker than other episodes? Let me know whatever you're feeling, and be sure to like the video if you did enjoy, and also hit that subscribe button if you want to see more content from me in the future. But until next time, everyone, please take care and have a good one.